and 1. Okay, so we're middle of Sif Test in Siman Ayin Hey, the halachis of Shabbos candles. Let's see if we could finish the Siman today. There's only a couple left. Okay, so we were up to now where it says Ubachrim Haloimdim B'Makom Acher, the second paragraph of Test in our print. So the kids are said like this: Ubachrim Haloimdim B'Makom Acher. Let's say you have Talmidim, like you guys, where you learn in one place, you sleep in another place, you eat in another place. Okay, so he says like this: if where you're staying, you have your own room that's yours, you have to be lighting with a bracha. Now again, in your dorms, you don't have to, because you have lights. So the Shalom Bayis is taken care of. But you can't rely on your parents, because your parents are lighting for themselves in their home. It's not your house. You're a Ben Bayis when you're there. But when you're not there, you have to do your own. So therefore, you guys should all join together to be part of the lighting. And one will do it for everyone. Now, over there, in the case that he's talking about, you have to have the candles lit when you get home, because you're not eating there, you're not learning there, so at night when you get home. But here, again, you're going to have the lights on in the dorm, so that is not required to be there. But it's going to be here where you're going to eat. Now, let's say you don't have your own room. It's not yours. You could do, people can move you around or whatever. So, if you don't have a wife who's doing it for you in your own home, because it's not your home. So, therefore, you have to chip in with the owner of the home. In those days, they didn't have a dormitory. In those days, they used to sleep in people's houses. So, if you're sleeping in someone's house, but you don't actually live there, you're doing everything else somewhere else. So then you have to chip in with them. However, let's say you're a part of their house, which means that let's say you're not renting a room and you're eating there. So then you don't have to join because you're part of the house. So if you go as a guest to someone for Shabbos, you're sleeping there and eating there, you don't have to chip in. But in your situation, you guys do have to light. Someone lights here and has all of you in mind. Like we said before, which would be the same case as a person who, let's say, goes to the Kiddush HaShulchan and he's staying in someone's house, but he's not eating there. He's eating by the Kiddush. So he's sleeping there, but he's not eating there. So he has a chiyuv to light candles in that place on his own. He's not part of the person who's lighting in the house. So the way he would do that is he would chip in with them, or he could light his own if he has his own room. But can't really, because he's not really eating there and there's light coming in. So the best thing in that situation would be to chip it. Okay, Yud. Noya guys. Let's say you have a bunch of women. Technically, only one person needs to be lighting for everyone. That would be technically. So even though there are a bunch of women, technically they're yetzer from one. The minig has become that they all like to light. So they do, and they can all make a bracha. How can they all make a bracha if they're not doing anything? So he explains, every extra additional light adds to the simcha. As we said before, that the idea of extra candles is more kavod, more einig, more simcha, all that stuff. So you're allowed to make a bracha just on that. He says the only thing is you have to be careful. You shouldn't have, in those days, one menorah meant one bowl, let's say, one kais, that you had two wicks coming out of it. He says that you shouldn't do, because that's really one thing. So everyone should have their own separate ner. But if Bishat Tzachak, let's say it's very whatever, so then Mekilin Gam said you could, and this is Hidu Zula, Huva B'Shulchan Aruch Rabbeinu, the Alter Rebbe doesn't bring this. Again, whatever, doesn't mean it's not something we follow, but it's not such a big deal today anyways. Now, if you look in the bottom where it says Behei, so over there, it says like this: Banais, when it comes to young children, Afktanais, even young ones, Madlikos Ner Echad, they always light one candle with bracha, even with a bracha. Now, part of this was, by the way, if you remember, Yitzchak married Rivka after she lit candles, and it said, right, the Medrash says that she brought back the miracles of Sodom. So after Yitzchak noticed that she lit, and how old was she? She was Ketana at that point. So therefore, it comes out that even young girls could do it with the bracha. The way the setup should be is that the girl should go first. Why should she go first? So that the mother can help her if any help is needed. If the mother lights and makes a bracha, then it's Shabbos for her. So this way, let the kid light first. She's available to help the child, and then she does it after. Now, when should the young girl start lighting? So ideally at 3, or even I feel that Rebbe says the truth is even kodim, even before they turn 3. As soon as they're old enough to do it. So what would be an opportune time? In other words, okay, how do you judge that? So the Rebbe writes, so Kedai Shetaschel Lahadik Berev Yom Tiv. One good idea would be is that Erev Yom Tiv that precedes the third birthday, that would be a good time to light. Why? Because because then she makes a shechayanu. Part of the nusach of bracha for Yom Tif is you make a shechayanu as well. So this way she can make a shechayanu on her first time lighting also. But let's say she can't. Let's say, for example, there's too many months in between. She was too young at that point to do it. So then, the best thing would be is to buy her some sort of simla chadasha, a new clothes, and this way she could not make a shechayanu al tzchinuch, yeah. And also because she has a lot of simcha from a new clothing, even though we don't usually make a bracha on clothing. But if she was a gdeila, which in that case, what's a second? No, sorry. It could be by a ketana, she could make a shechayanu regardless if she has a new clothing or not. Why? Because for her, she has such simcha that for chinuch, you're allowed to do it. But a gedola who were more chayshish, let's say she only starts after she's 12, we're worried she might do a bracha levatala, so there she should have a new clothing, and this way she could at least make a shechayanu in that way. So that's just an interesting little nakuda over there. Okay, but I remember I have a relative that started lighting the. I think they were really like maybe 2.5 almost, because that was the Yom Tif that worked out. They could make a shachriano, so they did it. I thought it was a bit early, but okay, each their own. They should, yeah. So what?
What difference like that?
Whoa, someone's asking a question. What?
I heard speech, so
Like when you do bar mitzvah one.
On what?
Eat bar mitzvah.
Well, first of all, she's not making a bracha on her age. She's making a bracha on her new mitzvah that she's doing. So tefillin, it's a good question. Do you make a shechyan on tefillin? Do you make a shechyan on tefillin? I guess because you're practicing and you're not really sure if you're going to do it right, so it could be that's why. And then what? You don't make a regular bracha in the beginning either, right? So I guess it's hard to make a shechyan.
Speech for time, you have to clear.
It's a good question. I don't know, but either way, here the Rebbe says she should wear. Over here, the Rebbe says she should have new clothing. Over here, the Rebbe says she should also have new clothing for that same reason, also. Okay, Sif Yud Aleph. It's a good question. I'm not sure. Sif Yud Aleph. Ein litein mayim. Okay, here's an interesting halacha. Okay, ein litein mayim afilu mi ba'od yoyim l'toich nekev ha'manoira shemachnisin sham es haner shel chelev oy shel shaiva kedei k'shekiyagia l'sham yiskav. Here he says a very interesting halacha. You should not put water in the place where you're putting the candle so that the fire should go out at a certain point. Okay? Now, what he's describing over here is a candle. A candle is a stick. Now, as the stick goes down, you put water, and when it reaches a certain point, it's going to go out. Now, most people don't do that. You do see people that put water when they light. You ever see they put water in the little cup? But there it's different. Why is it different? Because what happens in those cases is that the candle is made that it melts. It becomes a liquid or oil. And in both of those cases, they're completely floating on top. So when the fire goes out, why does the fire go out? Not because the water extinguished it, but because it ran out of fuel. Now, why do you put the water in then? Because you want it to be easier to clean. So it used to be they wanted to preserve their candles. They didn't want it to burn all night, and they had big candles. So they would put water in there, and this way, when the candle reached a certain point, it would go out. That you're not allowed to do because you're basically causing the extinguishing to happen later on Shabbos. Mashein over here, right? What's that? Over here, they're not doing that. Over here, you're basically doing it in a way that the fuel will get used up. You don't want it to get stuck, so therefore you put it. So therefore, for us, you see people that do it, they're allowed to do it. Now, however, according to Alter Rebbe, it says Gadol. He says, let's say you do have a need. For example, you're leaving and it's dangerous and you're afraid or whatever. So then, even in that case, if you do it by Shabbos, if you do it before Shabbos, if you do it on Friday, there is what to rely on. So again, technically, you still shouldn't do it. But if there's a big need and you do it before Shabbos, you can get away with it. Yeah. Okay, well, timers. We'll save it for another time. Timers, electricity. We do we discuss timers? No, we're going to get there by Bishul. I think we're going to get there. We're going to talk about timers. What? We did by Amir al we spoke about it. Maybe we did talk about it. We don't use timers for certain things. For example, you don't use timers to turn on your oven or off or off actually you do, but not to turn it on. Can things that you always use timers for that are very normal, like lights and air conditioning, so that you do. But this is a little bit different. This is an Isser Deraisa. You're actually causing the fire to go out. Mashinkin there, only midrabanan.
Well, would it be like decided to like shook the candle, the flame went out?
Oven's the same thing.
Oven is Isser Deraisa. You're putting on a fire. Oh, you're saying to put it out. So over there, okay, I hear you. It's maybe you could argue it's a grama what? Extinguishing is, but it really depends why. Basically, like this. I don't want to get too distracted. We'll talk about it later. But it depends why you put out a fire. If you're putting out a fire to save it, that's kivoy. That's an Isser Deraisa. If you're putting out a fire because you have no need for it, it's really only midrabanan. There's a difference. It's called meleches machshavas. In those days, they would put out the fire because they dafka wanted the pecham. They wanted the wick to become black. They could use it for ink or stuff like that. So that's called the Isser Deraisa kivoy. But if you're just doing kivoy because you have no need for it, it's not really an Isser Deraisa. But let's leave that for now. Let's leave it for now. We'll get there later. Yeah. It's for sure. It's midrabanan. That's for sure. But if it's midrabanan, maybe then you can put it out. But here, he's putting it out to save it. So that's why it would be Isser Deraisa. Okay, but let's leave that. I don't want to get too off. Yeah. If you put water in the cup where the candle is, yeah. So now the candle melts. So now it depends. In those days, the candle didn't melt. Imagine you take a regular candle and you have a little thing on bottom of a cup, and then the candle goes, and then it hits the water, and boom, it goes out. So that you're not allowed to do because you're causing the extinguishing to happen. Now, if you need it, you could do it also. That's what we're saying. If you put it in before Shabbos. Mashenke nowadays, when people put in liquid fuel or they call them neronim, the little ones that melt in the cup. So, right, they're a little candle and then they melt. So those you could put water in because it's not, the water is not putting it out. It runs out of fuel and then it just goes poof. And the water just makes it float to the top. And it keeps it clean. That's the only reason why you put the water in there, not because you're saving anything or whatever. In those days, they want to save the candle for the next time. So that would be you're putting it out because you need it to go out to use something. Mashinkin here, okay, but we'll get here. We'll get to Melech Mashavas. We'll get it to another time. For now, let's just finish the sif. Here we're talking about a little bit of a different thing. But let's leave it for now. Now, let's say what you want to do is you want to put a keli that has water underneath the menorah. So in other words, that that let's say sparks will fly out. Yiskavu, you want it to fall into the water and to extinguish itself. So then it's a Isser Gamar Hu Afilu Lahamin Meidiyim. That you're not allowed to do even if it's still Friday. However, well, the Hamid Kli Belimayim, but let's say you just put a keli without water, and this way, if any sparks fall out, they fall inside. So the Kabbalah Netzutzas, for the same reason, you want the sparks to go in there. That would be mutter afilu m'shech hasheichel. That would be mutter even if you do it by night. Ki Netzutzas eimeh mamash, because Netzutzas don't have there's nothing there. There's no substance there. So therefore, what's in the problem over here would be also you'll see in the next one Netzutzas is sparks. So part of the issue over here is that you're ruining a keli. When sparks fall in, it becomes muktzah now. So you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to ruin a keli. It's called being mevatel a kli meichana. You're ruining a keli for what it's allowed to be used for. But here you're not doing that because there's no substance to the spark. So you could take the keli away after. Mashenke in the water, as soon as the spark falls in, it gets extinguished by the water. That's active, more active. That's why we don't want you to do that. Now, let's say it's drippy. So you put a keli underneath there so that it's a drip into it. If it's on Shabbos and you put the keli there, then you're not allowed to do that. It's asr. Because as we just explained, that if it will drip inside, the keli will become muktzah because now it has the fuel that was muktzah fell inside of it, so you're not going to move the whole keli. So so you ruined the keli from what it was usable for. But also you're not allowed to do that in Shabbos. It would be as if you caused it to happen by itself. It's as if you broke the keli with your hands, even though you didn't. You just had something fall in it. But because you did that, you're not allowed to. But if you put it there before, then you're allowed to. Now what? So if you put it there on Friday, and now the problem was the oil will fall in there and ruin the keli, fine. So what happens if that's what happens? So and let's say the oil actually goes in there, even though you put the keli there when you were allowed to, which was on Friday. But now, actually stopping Ben Shabbos, you're not allowed to use that oil on Shabbos because it was muktzah. And va'akli aser betiltu, you're also not allowed to move the keli because you still ruined the keli became muktzah. Now you're allowed to put the keli there because you put it there before Shabbos, but it's completely muktzah. But if nothing drips into it, so then there's no problem, nothing fell inside of it, you could still move it. Now, if the sparks fell in, then what happens? Then there's no issue. You could still move the keli because sparks are nothing. You said there's ein by mamish. But we're talking about the oil or something like that, which has mamish, and it's muktzah because it was huktzah l'mitzvasa when Shabbos started. So then you wouldn't be able to use it. Okay, let's finish this up here. There is an inyan that you should put the challah on the table before you light the candles. Like we'll see later in Siv Beis. There were two reasons. Well, what is Siv? Which was what was the reason he brought over there? To remember. He said, he says the reason is because it was called a basis of davar aser. So because you want, let's say you have the candles on a tray and you want to move the tray later. So when the tray is lit, the candles are lit, for sure you can't move it because that's muktzah. But once the candles go out and now it's on your table and you want to clean up the next morning, you can't do that because the whole table became what's called a basis. It became like a platform, or became like a tray that you had something aser on, which is very strict. You're not allowed to move it. But over here, because you had the challah on it, so now it becomes a basis for a davar that's mutter and a davar that's aser. And then you are allowed to move it. So therefore, you'll notice when your parents light Shabbos candles, usually, depending on where they light it, but they'll put a siddur, a challah, or something like that. And this way, whatever the candles are on a basis for a davar mutter and aser. And we'll get to it later if we ever do, about the qualifications of it, or you'll get to it another time. But then you'll be able to move it once it is extinguished. Not while they're lit. But Isha Suma, what about a blind lady? The whole idea of Shabbos candles was kavod, einig, shalom bayis. She's blind. So how could she make a bracha? So in Yesh Labav, she has a husband, Yad Kabav Yivarach, then he should do it. Because as we said before, both of them have a chiyuv. She usually does it for him. But if he's better because he could see that and he'll benefit, then he should be the one to do it. But if he main labah, let's say she doesn't have a husband. So if he dara labah, let's say she lives alone. So then, in a certain way, she does benefit from light. Why? Because you think blind people's houses are dark? It's probably lit. Because when people come to visit them, or people should know their home, etc. So there's a reason why they have light. So in that case, madlekas and she could still make a bracha and light and make a bracha even though she lives alone. And she herself doesn't benefit from the light, but she does, because other people can see or other people know she's home. Now, let's say she lives with other people in one home, and other people are lighting. So then, and they're making a bracha because they see it. So then, madlekas asuma b'lei bracha, she should light without a bracha. Because she doesn't have any specific benefit from the candles, meaning other people are benefiting what's called extra benefit, but she's not getting extra benefit. She just needs a little bit of light so people could see. Once she has that, in theory, she's happy. She doesn't care for more. So therefore, she can't make a bracha on the extra. But, let's say she's the big boss, right? In other words, it's her house, even though there's other people there who are taka lighting. So then, tadliki tchila, she should light first. And to make a bracha because she's the first one. Then everyone else could light, and on their hisafa, on their extra lights, they are allowed to make a bracha. And therefore, they make that bracha after. Now, the last sif, let's say a lady forgot to light. Tadli kol yamehan der echad yesem imasha eser regila. And again, the Alter Rebbe said only if she was peisheya, she was negligent, then she always has to light one more candle. The same thing would be if she forgot many times. Tadli tamid der echad. She always has to light another candle for each time she forgets. Why? To be a remembrance, a sign. She should be careful. So therefore, if it was because of a oinus, so then because she doesn't have to do another one, because the whole reason was to make sure she doesn't do it again. But it was an oinus, which means that she didn't do this like it was an oinus. There's nothing she could do. She won't do this again. She doesn't need a reminder. She never forgot. It's not that she was pesheya. She didn't plan this. She got stuck in the airport, the airplane, or whatever was. It was delayed because of a storm, and she made it. Whatever the story was. That's another story. So then she wouldn't have to. Now, as I said before, if she's taka traveling, then some people have a minute, they only do 2. We said before, it seems like most people will try to stick to their original number as long as it's safe. And then we spoke about electricity, we spoke about that already, that let's say she taka didn't have candles with her, and she's stuck in a place, she goes, I don't have candles. So she was, if you want to call it pekshea, but there's electricity. So can she just go and turn off the electricity, turn it on, either make a bracha, don't make a bracha, we'll leave that for another time, but at least she should not be considered like she forgot to light. And then she won't have to add another one. So over here, it looks like some would say she does have to. There's probably enough what to rely on, though, that maybe she doesn't have to. If it ever happens, call a competent Rav. L'chura, we said before, she could light and make a bracha on electric, even if it's LED, which means it doesn't get hot. The best thing is to use what we call the battery and fluorescent and incandescent. So they get hot and they're batteries, so all the fuel is there. But b'diavad, if she can, then LED would work, and best again if she has a battery. And worst comes to worst, we quoted from the Zal Shimon Dvarkin that even on a regular light, he flipped it, someone flipped it for him and he made a bracha. But again, if you're going and you can get those little ones, they sell them online or whatever, these little options that people in the hospital, they're little candles that you could just, they're a battery. Now, not all of them are they're not incandescent, they don't get boiling hot, but at least you could use that, and that's a good thing to have in a hospital or something like that. The story will be as we went through all the halachis. Okay, so wait a second, hold on. The vart will be like this. We'll have the test. Oh, that was the screen sharing stop. 1 second, hold on.